Hello everyone, and welcome back to another lesson on the history of the Monster Hunter series. Today, we'll be looking at the third generation of games, including Monster Hunter Tri, Portable Third, and 3 Ultimate. When I originally started this series, I think the generation I was looking forward to covering the most was this one. A generation that I spent the most time with overall, clocking in hundreds and hundreds of hours between Tri and 3 Ultimate alone. It's a generation that introduced some of my favorite monsters, a generation that introduced me to some longtime friends that I still have today, a generation that would take me from simply dipping my toes into the series and finally taking the plunge, becoming a dedicated fan of Monster Hunter as a whole, excited for new releases in the series, and even revisiting past ones. I remember buying a Wii U simply because it came with a copy of 3 Ultimate and a Pro Controller. It was all I really played on the console for quite some time, and that should really say something considering people's general opinions towards the Wii U as a whole. Monster Hunter was that good, enough for me to buy a whole console, just so I could play that one game. Recently, for my birthday, I even received the second volume of the Monster Hunter Illustrations art book, which covers a lot about the third generation designs, so it really is the perfect time to be making this video. Many new concepts and additions were added in this generation, but at the start, many were removed. Looking back, it's pretty surprising to me how much was lost in the release of Tri, now that I can look at it with a more experienced and critical eye. Some of these additions withstood the test of time, like the updates to the Spirit Gauge or the Slime element, now known as the Blast element. And some additions didn't, like water-based combat. But, all in all, this was another step forward for the series as a whole, and I'm looking forward to revisiting it with you and reminiscing as we go through. If you haven't watched my previous videos on the history of the series, I suggest you do so now. Additionally, if you enjoy these videos and want to help support the channel, please consider liking the video and subscribing. It just takes a couple of seconds and really helps boost the reach of the video to Monster Hunter fans everywhere. What led Monster Hunter to become the Capcom powerhouse it is today? And how did the series perform since its initial inception and release in 2004? In this multi-part video series, we'll take a look at all 5 generations of the Monster Hunter franchise, as well as Frontier, Monster Hunter Online, and several other spin-off games that have been developed. I'm Super Rad, and today I'm here to bring you a brief history of Monster Hunter, 3rd generation.
Previously on Deadliest Hunters.
No! These floofs ain't hunters! Well, there's something worth hunting! With hundreds of beasties to hunt, all able to swallow you whole! You'll need more than your wits. Link up and battle with your friends on the fiercest online multiplayer for the Wii. In life, they're hunters! And then they're monster hunters! Hunting season is open! Rated T for teen.
Just a quick note before we really get into this. I generally record all of my footage myself when I can, but it's hard to get all of the footage for Tri as I no longer own a copy, and it seems impossible to get a save file for it that would have all the quests and equipment unlocked, making it much easier for me to make this video. That being said, I do still have a fairly thorough save file for 3 Ultimate, so much of what you'll be seeing for Tri will be coming from there. By the point Monster Hunter Tri was in development and set to release, the majority of Monster Hunter games, or rather all the mainline games, had been released on Sony consoles. So why then was Tri being developed for the Nintendo Wii of all things? Well, looking back at the release of the Wii and the total number of sales, it really was the dominating console at the time. You may not remember this, or may even be too young to have experienced it. But when the Wii was announced and approaching release, it was a cultural phenomenon. The change from a traditional Nintendo style to a console that was primarily centered around motion controls threw the market for a loop. And in all the right ways apparently, because the Wii was outselling the PS3 and the Xbox 360 in the United States, a country where Sony and Microsoft were generally dominant. This was even more prevalent in Japan, where the Wii was overall the most dominant console of the generation. It's no surprise then to find out that development for Monster Hunter Tri for the PS3 was ultimately scrapped, and design began for a console that would reach more audiences overall. But specifically in Japan, where Monster Hunter was a leader in their gaming market and culture. If you remember from part 1 of this series, a demo for the game was released with the re-release of Monster Hunter G on the Nintendo Wii. It should be noted that while Tri did introduce some forms of motion controls to the series, due to the Wiimote predominantly being a motion control device, the game was often sold alongside the Nintendo Classic controller, and was generally considered the preferable way to play. This demo also came over to America before the game's Western release. The game was released in Japan on August 1st, 2009, and it wouldn't be until April 20th, 2010 that we saw a North American release. Okay, so what did we get with this new release in the series? Well, it's probably better to start off with what was lost. Fans of the second generation of games, like Freedom Unite, may have been a little disappointed for one major reason. The only returning large monsters were Rathian, Rathalos, and Diablos. Unlike Monster Hunter DOS, Tri didn't include any subspecies either. On top of this, some of the new weapons introduced in the game were removed as well, including dual blades, gun lance, hunting horn, and the only additional gunner option, bow. Longsword fans could breathe a sigh of relief, however, as the weapon seemed to survive this purge. In total, only 18 large monsters were even available to hunt. That might seem like a small number, but 15 of these were original designs. Before we get into these new monsters, let's talk about one addition to the game that probably had the greatest impact on design choices and development. Monster Hunter Tri is the first of only 2 releases in the series to implement underwater combat. Maps were designed to have several areas where the player could not only swim in water, but also dive deep into these areas and fight monsters in multiple underwater locations. This combat was different, to say the least, focusing on a more 3-dimensional movement system, as the player could swim upwards and downwards. On top of this, the player now had an oxygen gauge that had to be maintained. This gauge could be affected in multiple ways. Players would regain oxygen if they resurfaced or if they swam through air bubbles found in multiple underwater locations. Additionally, players could carry items to refill their oxygen reserves. They wouldn't be able to build sets towards stopping the depletion of this gauge until the release of 3 Ultimate. The whole underwater concept received a fairly mixed reception. The slow movement underwater and requirement for oxygen could be considered limiting. Then again, it was a new option of exploration and combat in the game. It also allowed players to follow water-based monsters to continue combat, rather than being forced to wait for them to return to land. Looking back, however, it was a truly bitter addition, considering how much of the development time it took up and how much more could have been added or included instead of water combat. Maybe we could have had more new monsters. Maybe we could have had more returning monsters. Maybe certain weapons introduced in past games didn't need to be scrapped. Director Kaname Fujioka commented on the amount of effort required to implement this mechanic, and stated that these sections took too much time away from what other parts they could develop. Overall, I never personally had an issue with it during my time playing, but I was also someone introduced to the series with it. It just kind of fit in. With where we are now in the series, and what I've experienced in past games, all I can think about is how much more core content could have been added without its inclusion, and ultimately feel like it was a failed addition. Now, before we touch on the monsters, let's talk about what was added to equipment. Despite losing several weapons, one new Blade Master weapon was introduced. The Switch Axe, also known as the Slash Axe in Japan. The Switch Axe was a very unique addition to the series, and really marked what I consider to be Monster Hunter's more experimental phase of weaponry. The weapon has 2 forms, axe and sword, and can switch between the 2 at will, or during combos. This adds a large amount of versatility for the player while in combat. Now, I won't delve too deep into the weapon at this time, but maybe expect a more thorough look in a future dedicated video. Now, bow guns, on the other hand, were vastly different in how they were crafted. The guns were now fully customizable. Players could craft frames, barrels, and stocks for their guns, and mix and match pieces to better suit their needs. Some bowgun options were considered all-in-one packages and didn't require customization. There was also the introduction of the middle bowgun, which functioned as a middle ground between the light and heavy options. Armor remained largely unchanged from this generation. However, in Tri, players could continue upgrading their low-rank armor until it ascended into a high-rank variant. This would generally be a cheaper option material-wise for the player than just crafting a new piece outright. That is, if they've been keeping up up with upgrades as they progress. These pieces upgraded from low rank to high rank had minimally different resistances, but no changes too big to make a noticeable effect. Okay, so let's talk about monsters. As mentioned previously, there weren't many returning monsters aside from Rathalos, Rathian, and Diablos, as well as no subspecies included. However, some of the monsters added to Tri have had a lasting impact on the series, and even appeared on games all the way up to World. Gen 3 also introduced 2 new monster types, Leviathans and Brute Wyverns. Leviathans are sea or lava-based creatures and specialize in swimming, while Brute Wyverns have large, bulky bodies they use to fight you with brute force. So first up, we have the Great Jaggy and the Great Baggy, 2 bird wyvern creatures. Jaggy would be one of the first large monsters the players would hunt and try and prefer warm climates, while Baggy can generally be found around colder ones. It can also be noted that Great Baggy are generally larger than Great Jaggy. Kuropeko, another bird wyvern, an incredibly annoying monster to hunt. This monster can actually sing when it's in danger, and the song will get the attention of other large monsters in the area, sending them to your location, and potentially making the hunt more difficult. Royal Ludroth, a spongy leviathan who can store up large quantities of water to use in defense against other predators or hunters. Baroth, one of the first brute wyverns the player will ever face. Their hard heads protect them from most attacks. On top of this, they can roll around in the mud and wear the hardened clumps as armor. Gobel, another leviathan who is similar to that of a pufferfish. Gobel has the ability to swallow its prey whole and can emit blinding flashes of light similar to a flash bomb. Giganox, or Kezu-2 as I like to call them, a disgusting looking, cave-dwelling flying wyvern. Giganox has many abilities, but one truly spine-shivering tactic is when it lays Giggy sacs to spawn young Giggy, which will try to attach to you like a leech. Barioth, a saber-toothed cat-like flying wyvern, very similar in appearance to Nargacuga from Freedom Unite. It's a tundra-based monster, and weapons created from it generally have high affinity. Agnactor, a lava-based leviathan who dwells in the volcano area of Monster Hunter Tri. Unlike water-based leviathans, players can't dive in to chase after them, but don't worry about that since this monster can swim straight through rock toward you. Uragon, another brute wyvern who can smash his chin into the ground to cause seismic activity. It's incredibly durable, making it difficult for slashing-based weapons. If you knock an Uragon down, you can actually take a pickaxe to its back to mine some materials. Deviljho. In my opinion, Deviljho is one of the best things to come out of the 3rd generation. An absolute beast of a brute wyvern that has no remorse for any creature. It has a variant introduced in 3 Ultimate and has the ability to invade areas where hunts are taking place, disrupting any hunter in the area. Truly one of the most savage monsters in the series. In Tri, he is an online-only monster and can only be actively hunted in 6-star quests. Until then, the player will need to complete quests where it may invade. Finally, the game's flagship monster, and one of my all-time favorites, Lagiacruz. A large portion of the village questline focuses on the player taking one of these down. It can generate electricity around its body, and is generally considered to be the top of the aquatic food chain. On top of the large monster additions, there are also 3 new Elder Dragons to look at. Sadius is the first we'll take a look at and is considered the endgame hunt for village quests. You fight one in a special underwater cavern, full of weaponry like Ballista and a Dragonator. It has a large beard of fur and can even shoot out powerful beams of water. Then we have Gen Moran. I actually don't know much about its popularity, but it does have a rather unique and entertaining battle segment. Players will be on board a desert-based sailing ship and must use the provided equipment of cannons, ballista, and Dragonator to deal as much damage as possible. Players can actually jump onto it and mine various parts of its body, as well as damaging various body parts. Last but certainly not least is Alatreon, possibly my favorite Elder Dragon introduced to the series. This dragon has control over multiple elements, including dragon, ice, thunder, and fire. The players fight the dragon in a special location within the volcano called the Sacred Land. It is considered elementally unstable. Monster Hunter 3 was also the first game where the monsters could inflict elemental status effects on the player. These are known as blights and had various effects, on top of various ways of removing them. For example, Fire Blight would damage the player over time, but they could remove this through items, rolling 3 or 4 times, or rolling once in water. Several new locations are also introduced, the main location of which is Deserted Island, or D Island for short. This is one of the first locations the player will hunt in and varies from forest to cave to water-based areas. D D Island is within the same area as Moga Village, and the player can even see the entrance to Moga on the island. Players can actually freely hunt in this location without the need of accepting a quest. Additional locations include Flooded Forest, Sandy Plains, Tundra, Volcano, Underwater Ruins where the player fights Cedius, Great Desert where the player fights Gen Moran, Sacred Land where the player fights Alatreon, and 2 arenas, one land-based and the other water. As mentioned, attached to D Island is a small fishing hub known as Moga Village, and is where the player will start their journey. At the beginning of the game, the town is dealing with earthquakes, and the player is tasked with finding and hunting that which is thought to be responsible, a Legia Cruz. The town is above a large underwater tunnel system where Cedius dwells, and it is soon uncovered that the Elder Dragon is the cause of the earthquakes. There's not too much to cover about the village specifically. It has all the amenities you would expect from the past games, but also introduces the Argosy captain to the series. Through him, players trade special items for more useful ones. The captain will even reward you eventually with his longsword, a very appreciated gift for longsword mains out there. It should be noted that players can customize their home with various furnishings, and allow other players to visit their homes through an online connection. Farming also makes a return in the series, although it functions differently. The farm does not include any mining or fishing spots. Instead, it has multiple sites the player can level up that will provide various other crafting materials like mushrooms, herbs, and honey. Tri introduces an online hub similar to that of Mineguard Town called Locklack City. If you thought Mineguard was lost to time, just know Locklack is even more so. While there are restoration efforts for Mineguard, Locklack is having a much tougher time coming back to life. The city consisted of a main gate that would allow players to search for an online lobby. Up to 100 players could hang out in this location at any given time. Once in a lobby, they'd be on the main street, where only up to 4 players, those within your party, could enter together. Once again, the city contains many facilities known to the series that I won't go over again. Off of Main Street is Lodge Street, where the player can customize their house based on 3 building options. Leading from here is the Tavern, where players grab quests and eat meals. Players can also take on other hunters in arm wrestling, first introduced in Monster Hunter DOS. Similar to the feline comrades in Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, the player has a new companion they can bring with them on quests. This time around, players can have a Shakalaka friend named Cha-Cha, who can be invited on quests with them. Cha-Cha can level up from participating in missions with the player, and has multiple stats like stamina, health, attack, and defense. Players can unlock and equip Cha-Cha with various masks. These masks offer various effects and help the player on their quests. While in combat, Cha-Cha will dance, and certain combinations of dances could provide boosts to the player, such as attack up or defense up. Quests remain largely unchanged in this edition, but do include unstable environments, where during quests there is a chance a non-quest related monster will show up to potentially interrupt your hunt. This is particularly intrusive when Devil Joe shows up. It should be noted that offline quests did not have any high rank equivalents in this entry and wouldn't until 3 Ultimate. Overall, Tri received favorable reviews, even receiving a perfect 40 out of 40 score from Famitsu, the 11th game to ever do this. It went on to sell 1.9 million copies, effectively half of Freedom Unite, which was dominating in Japan, and it wouldn't even put a dent into the sales of the next game in the series. Let's take a look at Monster Hunter Portable 3rd.
HD で一狩り行こうぜ。
ハンターごと HD へ。
来ました。
いらっしゃい。
村長さんこんな顔してたんだ。迫力すごい。
この狩りごたえ HD モンスターハンターポータブルサード HD バージョン。
じゃあ行きましょう。
タプコン。
Now I'm going to start things off with a little correction from my previous video. In part 2, I mentioned Freedom 2 was one of the best-selling PSP games to date, and the best-selling PSP Monster Hunter game, but that was inaccurate. To clarify, Monster Hunter Portable 3rd actually sold the most out of all the Freedom and Portable series, clocking in 4.9 million copies. To put that in perspective for you, Freedom sold 1.3 million copies, and Freedom 2 sold 2.4 million, with Freedom Unite at 3.9. Even more specifically, Portable 3rd sold more as a Japanese exclusive than Tri and 3 Ultimate combined. Funny enough, the game was predicted to sell over 5 million copies, not quite hitting the mark, but getting incredibly close. It was known by Capcom that Monster Hunter didn't do as well in the West as it did in Japan. In fact, Western sales of Tri were particularly weak overall in comparison. This may have been why Japan decided not to release Portable 3rd in the West at all. A sad but ultimately understandable move on their part. Unlike Freedom being a port of Monster Hunter G or Freedom 2 and Unite building off of the first game with additional content, Portable Third was mostly a standalone experience and most of the game's mechanics and concepts had to be remade. That being said, it is still considered a successor within the Freedom and Portable series. Due to this, players cannot transfer their Freedom 2 or Unite save files. However, the players would receive several bonuses for loading their previous game's save data. Portable Third has a focus on sound design and graphical quality, looking to push the PSP to its absolute limits. Due to this, there is less overall content in the game in comparison to Freedom Unite, but more quests to accept. It has less melee and ranged weapons to choose from in comparison to Freedom Unite, as well as less armor pieces and items overall. The game also had an HD remaster on PS3 called Monster Hunter Portable Third HD version, released August 25th, 2011. It's really no surprise that the game was so successful. Coming off the heels of Unite and Tri, developers opted to include most of the new content from Tri as well as the removed content that had shown up in Unite. For one, underwater combat was completely removed from this entry in the series, and locations from Tri that had underwater or swimming segments were reworked, and while Tri had kept the inclusion of purple sharpness, Portable Third removed this level. Also, feline companions marked their return, rather than Cha-Cha, who we were introduced to in Tri. All weapons from Freedom Unite as well as the Switch Axe make their return in Portable Third. However, the customizability of the bowguns does not. Yakumo Village is the new offline hub for Portable Third. It's a mountain hot springs with a large focus on verticality. The village is broken up into 3 different levels, which the player can traverse using the multiple staircases provided. Shops are generally found on the first floor of the village, while offline quests and the player home are on the second. Finally, on the top level is the Gathering Hall, where the player can take part in multiplayer quests. The village hot springs can be used by the player to boost their abilities. While using the springs, the player can purchase various beverages that will give them various beneficial effects. The hot springs are guarded and run by the feline Spring Keeper. Farms once again make a return in this generation, and the player now has a more streamlined approach to gathering here. The player can send their feline companions out to mine various ore or out on exploration efforts to gather materials. Additionally, this is where the player will train their companions. Exclusive to Yakumo is the wood from their surrounding forests and carpentry efforts. The skill of their carpenters is so high they can actually make various weapons and equipment out of it. Many of the monsters introduced in Tri marked their return in the Portable series, as well as a new subspecies for them. Additionally, there were more returning monsters like Nargacuga and Tigrex, who also received subspecies. Starting with the new additions, we have Arzuros, a new fanged beast similar to that of a bear. They even feed on fish and honey. Lagombi, an ice-based fanged beast very close in features to Arzuros, but with incredibly large ears, which make it susceptible to sonic bombs. Volvidon, another fanged beast, similar both to Arzuros and Lagombi. This monster prefers warm areas such as sandy plains or the volcano. Additionally, it has an incredibly long tongue. Durambros, a large brute wyvern with a gigantic tail that can spin around to cover a wide area. Great Roggy, a monster very similar to Jaggy and Baggy from Tri, but has the ability to spew a toxic mist. Nebelsnarf, a sand-based leviathan similar in design to Gobel, with a giant mouth and ability to suck in prey. And the flagship monster of the series, Zinogre, a fanged wyvern with wolf-like features. It has the power of electricity. When a Zinogre is knocked down, the player can take a bug net to its back to gather materials. On to subspecies, we have Brute Tigrex, an even more aggressive and powerful version of Tyrex that can even damage and send players flying with just its roar. Green Nargacuga, a more agile subspecies of Nargacuga that can also easily stun hunters with its slam attack. Crimson Kuropeko, an electric subspecies of Kuropeko that has the ability to blind the opponent similar to a Gypsaros. It has the ability to have monsters it summons with its song enter already in rage mode, which is bullshit. Purple Ludroth, a poisonous subspecies of Ludroth with a pink color on its skin and spongy mane. Jade Baroth, an ice subspecies of Baroth that lives in cooler environments like the tundra. Instead of mud, Jade Baroths keep a large amount of snow and ice packed around their body. Baleful Giganox, an electric subspecies of Giganox that can also turn red when enraged, similar to a red Kezu. Sand Barioth, a warm climate subspecies of Barioth that lives in the sandy plains. Hey, just a quick side note, I forgot to mention Glacial Agnactor in this video for some reason, and the footage was even recorded, so I don't know why I forgot to actually put him in the script. He should be right here, right there. Okay. Finally, there's one new Elder Dragon introduced to the game, Amatsu, a flying Elder Dragon that never really touches land during battle. It is very similar in motion and design to Leviathans, and also has a wind barrier that is similar to that of a Kushala. It is fought in a newly introduced area, the Sacred Pinnacle. Areas from Tri return, while a few special areas are added for specific monsters. Polar Field has been added for fighting a Eucanalos, Lava Canyon has been added for fighting an Acantor, and the Sacred Pinnacle, as mentioned earlier. There is also one new typical quest area added called Misty Peaks. One final note on the monsters, Dragonblight did not make a reappearance in Portable 3rd, but would appear again in 3 Ultimate. New to Portable 3rd were some additions to Feline Comrades. Specifically, Comrades can now be used in online multiplayer quests, as well as against Gen Moran. Previously, Comrades were unable to join quests featuring such large monsters. Feline armors can now be customized further, with the player being able to change the helmet and torso. They could wear different armor pieces based on slain monsters. Weapons could also be customized now, but still fell into only the slash and impact roles. Additional features like cats being more emotive, the ability to change their name, and the ability to search for specific types of felines were added. All in all, they became more accessible and fleshed out, which was a welcome addition to offline players. As mentioned at the beginning of this game's section, it performed amazingly well, becoming one of the best-selling games on the PSP, and best-selling portable Monster Hunter game ever, having sold better than even Monster Hunter 4 and 4 Ultimate, though not combined. And this was only as a Japanese exclusive. The sheer popularity and praise of the game was phenomenal, to say the least. The next game in the series would sell fairly well, although not as well as Portable 3rd, and would take the player back underwater and back to Moga Village. Let's check out Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate.
Mächtige Monster besiegen. Hunderte Waffen und Rüstungen erstellen. Über 200 Missionen meistern. Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, exklusiv für Wii U und Nintendo 3DS.
Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate is the expected G expansion of Monster Hunter Tri. It was not only released on the Wii U, but also on the Nintendo 3DS portable console, and players could freely transfer their save file back and forth between the two if they owned a copy of both games. This allowed the players to take their game on the go, while also having the option to play a higher quality home console version of this inclusion. Players could even play together locally with one player on a Wii U and one on the 3DS. However, online play was only supported on the Wii U version. This marked the return of both Moga Village as well as underwater combat. The expansion offered multiple new additions that we'll go over. One interesting inclusion was the addition of a new Shakalaka companion. Players can now go on quests with both Cha-Cha and his rival Shakalaka, Kayamba. A useful feature called Target Camera was also implemented. Normally, when the player pressed the L button, the camera will face whichever way the player is facing. Now, when a large monster is targeted, pressing the L button will immediately face the monster. Weapons removed in Tri also make their return, while removing Tri's bowgun customization options. Like the Portable series, 3 Ultimate also offered downloadable event quests that would be available in the online hub area forever once unlocked. The offline hub finally received high-rank quests that the player could participate in. As expected from a G game, 3 Ultimate reintroduces G-rank quests. This is the first entry in the series where G-rank sets have drastic visual differences. On top of this, most of the armors provide skill points to different skills than their low and high counterparts. A new and recurring mechanic in the series introduced is Hunters for Hire. These hunters are NPC versions of players you've met online and received the guild card of. They offer quests that they are willing to take on and can be sent out with several other hunters if you pay a small fee, and can come back with various rewards. The hunters will update their sets to match their real-life counterparts as you meet up with them online. The mechanic reappears in Monster Hunter 4U and Monster Hunter Generations. Moving back to the online hub, it's important to note that the players no longer visit Lochlac City for online quests. Instead, there is a new area called Port Tanzia, which is much smaller and doesn't contain amenities like player housing. Instead, it consists of 2 areas, the marina where all the shops are, and the tavern, where players can grab quests and eat at the canteen. Multiple monsters return from Portable Third, as well as some from old games, like Plesioth and its subspecies. Subspecies from Portable Third also show back up, as well as some new additions. Brand new additions include the game's flagship monster, Brachydios, who also introduces a new element called Slime, where buildup of the element can cause high damage explosions. This would later become known as Blast Element in future releases within the series. In Japan, Brachy is on the cover art, while Azure Rathalos was used in North America. A new Elder Dragon is also introduced called Dire Moralis, who is fought in its own special location known as the Tainted Sea. Dire Moralis is an incredibly large monster that can transition between land and sea and will do so fairly frequently while in combat. New subspecies include Rust Duramboros, a subspecies that is very similar to its normal counterpart, but has a more axe-like tail. Stygian Zinogre, a dragon element subspecies that sports a darker color scheme. The attacks sport a red charge effect rather than the yellow and blue electric effect. And Ivory Ligiacruz, a land-based subspecies of Ligiacruz. It rarely enters the water during combat and has a more powerful and wider set of electrical attacks. Its skin is an ivory white color, hence the name. Two of the Elder Dragons introduced in Tri also received new subspecies, specifically Golden Ceatus, a fully grown version of your typical Ceatus with both horns fully developed. It sports a golden color and mane, and Hollow Genmoran, a larger and stronger subspecies of Genmoran. Now, something to point out is the existence of rare species, which are incredibly powerful types of already existing monsters. These aren't to be confused with variants, such as Furious Rajang. In Part 1, Flyan and I called Silver Rathalos and Gold Rathian a subspecies, but this was my error in the script. Rather, they are part of the rare species classification. Introduced in 3 Ultimate are 2 new rare species. Lucent Nargacuga, a rare species of Nargacuga that has white fur and the ability to turn invisible, and Abyssal Ligiacruz, a rare species of Ligiacruz with black skin and scales. It always appears in a fully charged state, and can even create whirlpools within the water to disorient hunters. Finally, there is the introduction of a new variant, Savage Deviljho, which is a Deviljho that stays within a permanent rage form state during combat. However, it can still enter a further level of rage where the dragon element surrounds its face and its eyes glow a bright red. It's faster and stronger than your typical Deviljho, and can swiftly cart even the most experienced hunters. 3 Ultimate went on to sell 2.6 million copies and was received fairly well in Japan and the West. A gaming news site called Digital Fix even said it could very well be the best reason to own a Wii U. And that's all I have for you on the 3rd generation of Monster Hunter. A generation of games that really influenced me. If it wasn't for Tri or 3 Ultimate, I might not be here right now, writing the script, recording this footage, editing this video. Met some of my best friends that have affected my life so drastically. Who knows where I would be right now? From what I understand, online functionality is still running for 3 Ultimate. So if you want to ever try out some of this generation's exclusive content, there's no better time than right now. In the next part of the series, we'll be discussing Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, Generations, and Generations Ultimate. There really is so much content to explore within those games. If you enjoyed this video and found it informative, consider supporting the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Again, it only takes a couple of seconds, and it helps support me in my goal of creating this content for you all. I try to respond to every comment that I can, so if you want to hear from me, comment below. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.